Right, we got to do that. Got it. Okay. Okay, so just again, I'm super grateful that Katie and Cass and Zone Captains in general invited me tonight, because partly because you all have been doing so much work supporting one another as neighbors and supporting this whole recovery process after the fire. My name is Christina Kukuk. My pronouns are she, hers, and I my experience with the fires started as a resident in Ashland, watching the smoke out my window with my kids at home trying to school, and then supporting parishioners who lost their homes after that. So I have been here in the Valley since 2016, January 2016. And my background is a shorter career as a newspaper and magazine journalist, and then about 17 years in faith community leadership as clergy in the United Church of Christ. That's where I continue to serve. But these last few years, that's broadened out into community chaplaincy. And I have some experience in the hospital, some experience with hospice, and now with the long-term recovery group, specifically with disaster recovery and the emotional and spiritual care needs of that recovery journey. So I'm grateful to be here with you tonight. I'm trying to think if there's anything else about myself. You can ask me later if you want to, but that's an intro to me and some of my work in self-care and self-compassion is greatly shaped by my own journey to try to figure out how to have greater self-compassion. So I want to talk about a couple of things tonight. I did not create a fancy slideshow for you. I just thought we would talk. And this is audience participation. So I have a couple of questions to throw out there. When I do, you can feel free to unmute yourself. If you're more comfortable sharing in the chat, I'll watch that. But whatever you're most comfortable with. My only rule is that you take care of your needs. And so if you don't like to look at your face and you don't want your video on, that's okay with me. If you feel some emotion bubble up and you need a minute, you need to grab a warm cup of tea or something else like that, just take care of yourself. That's my only rule. And hope that you will give yourself the same compassion and care and reverence that I have for you. So there are a couple of things. I wanted to introduce myself, and then I have a couple of questions, and then I want to talk tonight about some of my favorite parts of the body: the brain, the heart, and the gut. I really love the body. This is probably the fault of being born to a surgical nurse and studying all of her magazines that we got at the house, a midwife and a surgical nurse, my mother. So I've kind of been fascinated with the body my whole life. But I went into the emotional and spiritual care part of taking care of bodies while my family are actually nurses and folks who do first responder kinds of things. So I want to share a little bit about the body and check in about what we know about our brains and our hearts and our guts, and talk a little bit about what happens after a super stressful event to our bodies, how they take care of us, and then how we can take care of them. And then I'm going to share a particular grounding technique. There are lots of them, but there's one that I have learned as a hospice chaplain that I thought might be helpful to us, and especially here on this Valentine's Day. It's called the anchoring heart technique, and it's something that might be helpful or useful to you as you're living your life. I always tell people, take what's helpful, leave what's not. So I'm not personally offended if you're like, meh, doesn't work for me. That's okay. I'll offer that, and we'll see, where that resonates with people, where it doesn't. And then I just want to give you some time to ask questions of me if you'd like to, if there's anything you'd like to talk about tonight. So first thing I wanted to ask is, do we have any first responders? Anyone who's been an EMS or a firefighter or police officer? Anybody in the room tonight been a first responder?
Oh.
Nope.
Not tonight? That's okay. First responders have a particular perspective on what happens with our brain and our emotions when we respond to an immediate need. So I just kind of wanted to check in and see if we had any of those first responders. So then the next question is, and we'll get to a little bit about why I asked about first responders. Then the next question is, I want to talk a little bit about the brain. I think the brain is fascinating. And as adults, I know you all have knowledge that you're already bringing into this room. So what are some of your favorite things that you've learned about the brain?
Brain plasticity.
Plasticity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, our brains can change. They
Yeah.
rewired. Yeah.
It's mostly made out of fat.
It's mostly made out of fat.
All I know is that when you go through trauma, sometimes your brain blocks things out to protect itself.
Yep. Our brains work fast to protect us from real painful stuff. Yeah.
The
Mike?
more new things you learn, the more new creases you put in your brain.
The more new creases
Pathways,
that you put in your
yeah.
brain. I didn't learn this as a kid, but my kids learned it in school. They've already learned about the parts of their brain, the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. They learned about their emotional brain or their reactive brain and their thoughtful brain. And they have better words for it, but they talk about the different parts of the brain. That the amygdala is the fight, flight, or freeze part. Like in second grade, they're learning this, which I wish we had, but any other favorite bits of information you've learned about the brain? Well, Cass, I wanted to share something with you because you said that you were really tired today and all you did was sit there. Here is a little bit of brain information that might resonate. Although our brains make up less than 3% of our body weight, less than 3% of our body weight, they use 20% of our total daily energy supply.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
20% of our total daily energy supply.
That explains some stuff.
Yeah, right? That explains why stress fatigues us.
Yeah.
And grief, because our brain is working through lots of memories and things. It makes us tired all in itself without us doing anything with our bodies. So 20% of your total daily energy needs used by that brain.
Is there a statistic on how much that increases with stress or
You got your wallet with you?
or vigilance?
Great. That means I gotta stop and get my purse out.
That is a good question. What we know is that the more stress, the more the adrenaline part of the brain, the more escalated our nervous system gets, the more energy is consumed. So that it doesn't have energy for the other things. Yeah, but I don't have a figure on what percentage.
Wonder how much spreadsheets take.
Right. How much does Excel documents take?
I love them.
I really like this picture of the brain. Will it show it for you? I might have to stop the background for a minute here. Don't judge me for my closet. Here, I'll
Never.
stop it so I can show you this. Here we go.
Wow.
This would be a cool slide if I was that, like I did that tonight, but I didn't do that tonight. This is an image of a scan of the brain's white matter, showing the nerve pathways between different areas.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that white matter is made up of nerve fibers and axons, which use electrical signals to carry information. And the blue colored nerve pathways connect to the cerebrum. I won't tell you all the other things, but what do you notice about the color scheme there?
And the stem has more red.
Yeah, there's a red section in the middle. The things colored red are the connections between the left and right sides.
Wow. It's like a tie-dye rainbow.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
Oh, tie-dye.
lots of blue.
lots of blue. Lots of blue.
I love the purple.
Isn't that cool? I love that. I have showed this. This is one of my favorite books. It's the DK, and I'm going to go back to my background there. It's the DK. DK Smithsonian Human Body, Your Amazing Body, as you've never seen it before. Anyway, I like that. One thing that I have learned more recently, I had learned about the amygdala. You know, sometimes it's called our lizard brain. It's our survival brain. It's the oldest part of our brain. It's the part that listens and hears that rustling in the bushes and says, that could be a mouse or a mountain lion, but I'm going to bet on mountain lion so that I survive this encounter and run away. The amygdala is the one that keeps us safe. That's the part that activates at any sign of danger. I'd learned about that part of the brain. What was newer was that red part in the middle. There's a corridor there in the middle that processes, I think that is called the central corridor, but I am not a neuroscientist, so don't quote me on that. It receives and processes sensations. That's where sort of the integration of what we're experiencing in the world and ourself happens. I was surprised that that's where it processes sensations. But one of the things that I've learned about traumatic events is that when the sensations become too much, when we perhaps fear pain, you were talking a little bit about our brain shutting off so that we don't remember things and we don't experience things. What happens is that central corridor gets shut down. It gets sort of numbed. And sometimes that can be through a really intense experience. And sometimes it can be through the numbing methods that we use ourselves because we have some hesitancy or fear around experiencing and feeling what we're feeling. We know that amygdala is overactivated when someone suffers from PTSD. But something that we all do is numb that central corridor to block out our sensory experiences, especially when those sensory experiences may be painful or we don't know what they are. So this is where some of the grounding techniques you might have heard in the past come in. They're designed to help us break through our habit of numbing Numbing helps right at the beginning. The reason I ask about first responders is that if you ask a first responder about their, what's their emotional process when they respond to an emergency? Often folks will say, and folks who served in the service can say this too sometimes, well, you don't feel, you just act. And that's part of what you have to do. You have to be able to act without really processing your feelings or your thoughts. You don't have time for that. You have to act. It has to be instinctive. So one thing that I have fallen into a habit of doing numbing since COVID and since the fires and all the other things that have piled on top of that. Numbing can take a lot of forms. And there are the ones that are societally frowned upon, and then there are the kinds of numbing activities that are socially acceptable. So for example, overwork is a numbing habit that's socially acceptable. Excessive alcohol consumption is a numbing approach, is a numbing habit that is not so socially acceptable. Although there's quite a bit of alcohol culture that folks in recovery have to fight against. Say mommy needs wine kind of t-shirts and cups and things like that. It's like there can be a lot of challenge for folks who are in recovery and trying not to access that as a numbing agent. So I wanted to share, I just ask what might be one of your favorite numbing methods, and I'll confess to mine first so that you don't have to feel embarrassed. One of my favorite numbing methods since COVID and the fires, and we have this house where there's no private space, and I'm an introvert, so I like the quiet. So what I've slipped into doing is staying up after everyone else goes to bed. And at first I just do Duolingo, right? It's a little language app on your phone, and I'm trying to brush up on my Spanish. So at first I'll just do Duolingo. And, it's gamified so that you kind of keep doing it because you're trying to earn points and beat your friends. But then after I've finished all my Duolingo lessons, I will, my brain is awake, and I'll just scroll through Instagram or Facebook. Don't actually interact with anybody, and I'm not actually connecting, but I just scroll until I look up, and of course it's 1:30 and that is not great, so then the next day I'm tired and I do the numbing thing in the evening. It builds on itself. So Duolingo as a gateway to mindless social media scrolling has been a definite go-to numbing habit for me in the last few years. So I was curious if is Wordle a numbing habit, Cass?
Oh yeah.
Awesome. Anybody else have an example of a numbing activity that you've used?
Just like online card games, like solitaire games.
Oh yeah.
Candy Crush.
Candy Crush.
Social media and games, and also reality TV.
Reality TV.
And
Oh yeah, we're binging Survivor.
Oh, well, I'm addicted to all the Real Housewives of all the counties, you know what I mean? I don't even listen to it in front of anybody because I'm so embarrassed by the trash that it is, but I don't know, I get lost in it, and that numbs. I think that's where that numbing thing happens, as I get lost in this ridiculous, these self-entitled people's problems. And yeah, so that resonates with me for sure.
Yeah. Mine is I read to a bad level. I'll read. I get so lost in my book. I forget the rest of the world. I forget that my kid needs dinner. I will just. It's a book for me. Oh goodness.
A numbing can take a lot of forms. And I think overwork is one. Constantly helping others can work as a numbing thing, so that you're focused on other people and not really feeling what you're feeling or where you're at. There are almost anything can become a numbing, drugs and alcohol obviously can be numbing agents, and they can also be, used responsibly. The bridge is usually where it starts to prevent you from really being in touch with yourself and what you're feeling. It's really normal and a helpful function of your brain to cut off that connection, to limit the amount of sensations that you're actually receiving. In certain situations, that's super helpful of your brain. It's trying to help you out. In hospice chaplaincy, in bereavement care, we affirm and normalize for people that lots of people just feel numb in the first few weeks after a loss. And people will think, well, I haven't cried yet. What's wrong with me? And like, that is totally normal and totally fine. It's your body giving you a little bubble of protection until you're at a place where you can process what you've been through. And that's partly the key, is getting to a place where you can process what you've been through.
I was curious, Christina, like, is there like a set time limit, like when you're allowed to feel, like start to process it? Like my fiance lost both of his parents. He's only 40 years old, the oldest of 5 other siblings. And his dad died like a year ago, and he's just now, and his mom died a year and a half before that. And it's just like, he's just now experiencing the grief. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What's wrong with me? And I was like, I think that's normal. Like if it's happening now, that's when it's happening. And maybe the same for fire survivors. It's been 2.5 years, and I've heard it in this room before where people are like, I'm just numb. I can't really feel happy or sad. So is it okay if it's like,
I love that you asked that question. Thank you so much. I love that you asked that question, because the answer is there's no timeline. There isn't a normal or an abnormal timeline for any kind of major loss. And fire recovery is a loss. It is a loss of safety. It's a loss of past identity, memories and mementos. It's also a loss of future identity, where you thought you would be. And it's a loss of community. It's a loss on a lot of levels. And we're bad enough as a society dealing with loss when it's the death of a loved one. And we're even less well equipped, I think, to deal with the community losses that like the fires have brought our way. So I love that you asked the question about like, is there a deadline like where you should be over this? The answer is, and I hope this doesn't sound like, I want to say it's good news, there's not a deadline, but it does shift. Like how you carry the grief shifts, and it does get better. It can get better with integration. And that's what grounding practices help us do. What I would say is, if I want to put a pin in that, because there's a point at which if we're worried about how disconnected we feel from our feelings or our experiences, then it would be, I would recommend checking in with somebody a psychologist or a psychiatrist, just to check in about that, a professional of some kind, if we're getting worried. And grief is really, it's more like a sneaker wave. We can feel like we're doing okay, and then we're walking along the shore of the beach. The waves are splashing at our ankles. We're like, we can do this. And then all of a sudden, a sneaker wave will knock us down.
Yep.
And it will feel like, what in the world was that? You know, like, it's 3 years. Where did that come from? That came out of nowhere. But it's more like a sleeper wave that way. Sneaker wave. I used to make an analogy that grief was like some asshole hiding behind the couch who was just, you're just sitting there relaxing, trying to enjoy your life, and then grief jumps up from behind you and whacks you across the head, and you're like, what's that for?
Again, we love those kind of authentic analogies, because I'm sure we can all raise our hand that that's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
That was a slightly violent image, so someone told me about the sneaker wave, and I was like, okay, that's less violent. But so I mean, your body is wise. Your soul, your brain, your heart has its own wisdom, and that's a more reliable wisdom than me or anybody else saying, well, you should have gotten over this by now. So that's a good transition to grounding techniques and why they work, and why they can be helpful, or when they can be helpful. So numbing can be super helpful, and then there's a point at which numbing can interfere with our ability to move forward. In bereavement care, we talk about not stages of grief so much as tasks of grief. And the first one is always to accept the reality of the loss. But the second one is to process the pain, which is the part we don't want to do. To process the pain of grief. And these aren't linear, they happen at different moments, but it's to actually experiencing the feeling. The reason we eventually need and want to feel our feelings is because that's what keeps us connected to our real self. And the more we block feeling what we're feeling, the more disconnected from our real self we're going to be. Some people talk about soul injury. It can be if that numbing from our feelings and our experiences continues, we can experience a soul injury in that it's like unmourned loss or hurt, unforgiven guilt or shame, or a fear of helplessness or loss of control. And that helplessness and loss of control has felt to me like a pretty significant aspect of this fire recovery. That continues to cause pain and challenge. Grounding techniques create a safe container for us to feel what we're feeling. So as far as grounding techniques go, I would say that there's lots of different ones, and I have some favorites. It kind of depends on the situation and what's going on and what the feeling is. But the one I wanted to share tonight is called anchoring heart technique. Different ones will work for different people different ways. Because of my story and my journey, one of the grounding techniques that I actually really use a lot is to put my feet on the ground and rest my hands on the top of my thighs. And there's something about that is self-comforting to me. So three different people won't be comforted by the same actions. Three different people might need three different ways of self-comforting, and you might need one self-comforting, approach tonight and a different one tomorrow. So it's kind of listening to your body. Before I share the heart anchoring heart technique, does anyone have a favorite grounding practice that they've used in the past or learned in the last few years that's been helpful?
I've just started doing this where you breathe in and count a certain number, whatever, and then breathe out for as long as you can, so breathing in maybe 6 and maybe out to 8.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps to go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll admit I use almost no grounding techniques. I forget about those. You know what I mean? Like I'll be in my own anxiety and stress and busyness, but I did have during the pandemic some real almost panic actually. So I started doing like tapping, which is super, I don't know if that's a grounding technique, but I'll like be in the car and just feel this thing like for no reason. I'm like, oh Lord, let me get this under control before it gets to like, the next level. And so I'll do like tapping and deep breathing. And I don't know if that's grounding, but that's kind of works for me. I bought all the lavender this valley like has, and I like drowned myself in it and it didn't help. So I was like, okay, I got to do something different. So
You can have my share. Ugh.
okay, because like it didn't work for me. The other thing is like I'll talk myself down from it because I go already to like death in my mind, like from 0 to death. And then I'll just be like, no. Like I'm literally talking to myself, like off the ledge. Like that's not what it is. It's not that, so. But I forget about all these other awesome things y'all have, and I never use them, so.
Yeah.
I'm
Has
okay.
anyone heard of square breathing?
I've never heard anything called that.
It's there's actually a little app that you can use. I think the Calm app has the square breathing on it, where you inhale for like the count of 4 and then you hold while it goes across, and then you exhale for a count of 4 and then you hold while it goes across, and it just slows your nervous system down. One of my favorites for like an anxiety is called the 5 senses, which is a grounding in your senses. I know that sounds. So what happens is when our nervous system gets activated, our energy moves from like in our gut and in our groundedness up into here, and you will feel scattered or jumpy or I will actually get to where noises are. I'm highly sensitive to noise. Our triggers for I don't want to overuse the word trauma, but this is a trauma response trigger. Can be lots of different things, but it the impact is in anyway, I'll stop there because I lost my train of thought. But the 5 senses is a good grounding one. Some people use a body scan. I can't do a body scan to myself very well for some reason. My therapist can do it. She can narrate it and then that helps me, but I can't do it like to myself. So, so there's some different grounding techniques. The goal, Kristen Neff. Yeah, Lorraine. Thank you. Is that someone who has had some good ideas for?
Yeah, Kristen Neff has a lot of information about that. And one thing that I've done and she's done and is it's kind of in the moment when like somebody here was saying you're going from 1 to 1,000 or something.
Yeah.
And you take your hand and you just put it on your cheek like a comforting thing. Yeah.
Mhm,
Or you can put it on your heart.
mhm.
But yeah, this one just seems to be so like, oh, somebody's there.
Oh, I like that.
Neat.
That's cool. What you're trying to do is tone down the amygdala. But it takes some time and it takes some practice. The trying to get back into our animal body and away from our racing thoughts. So so I thought I would share with you one other grounding technique that you might find helpful, might not. It's called anchoring heart. My profession is especially bad at this, but one of the things that we have to keep reminding ourselves is that talking about our feelings is not the same as feeling our feelings. So figuring out how to feel your feelings is what actually helps you integrate your experiences and your in my world, your soul, your mind, body, and spirit. So any kind of grounding technique is an act of self-compassion.
Cool.
It's respecting your body, yourself, your being. And this one was developed by a group called Opus Peace, which is a coalition of nurses and chaplains who especially support veterans as they're dying, so that they can, as they say, die healed. We're not dying, but a grounding practice can help us integrate our experiences with our sense of self in a way that helps us become more whole. It allows our pain and our joy to sit side by side, so that the wholeness of our experience as a human can be integrated.
That's beautiful.
So I keep talking too long. So here's the anchoring heart technique. I'm going to explain the 3 steps, and then maybe we'll just do it together if you want to, if that's it. And then, again, this was used for veterans who suffer from PTSD. For severe PTSD, you get separated. Your perception of where you are gets disconnected from where you actually are. So your nervous system puts you back into a combat zone. Even if you're just sitting in a folding chair watching the 4th of July parade, your nervous system can't tell the difference. So the grounding technique helps you reconnect to where you actually are and who you actually are and how safe you actually are. I have an example, but I'll have too many examples. So here is the technique. The technique starts with anchoring your hand firmly and tenderly on your heart. And firmly is the operative word. It's not just kind of like that light thing when you're doing the Pledge of Allegiance, but so that you can actually feel a little pressure against your rib cage. So you can actually feel firmly your hand holding your heart. And yeah, I know it's the actual heart. This is a little bit lopsided. So wherever feels like your heart for you is good. So, and you can use 1 hand or 2 hands, but you're going to firmly and tenderly put your hand on your heart and breathe deeply so that you can feel your hand holding you. And the second step is to get real with yourself. To open your heart to whatever you are feeling or trying not to feel. Not what you're thinking, but what you're feeling. Can you be honest about what you're feeling? Good, bad, ugly, beautiful. My example is that I was running late earlier in the week, and on the way to this appointment, and I was trying to ask myself why I was being so mean to myself and yelling at myself for being late. What I realized I was feeling really deeply was shame. And so it's like getting in touch with that, what you're feeling, without trying to rationalize it or ask why you're feeling that. Just what are you feeling, or trying not to feel. And then the third step is to be still for a moment and curious about that brave place inside you that is strong enough to hold your pain without fear. Some part of you is brave enough to hold that feeling. Some part of you is not afraid of your feelings. Some people try to imagine that's sort of like the hero within. Like, wow, you're holding some intense pain. And then when it's natural, when you feel yourself grounded, when you feel like you've been able to hold the pain and the strength together for 5 to 10 seconds, then you can take a breath and release and continue with your next thing. This kind of grounding practice takes practice. That's why it's called a practice. And it may be easiest to practice it when you're not feeling upset or anxious or triggered, but when you're feeling a sense of wonder and joy. What you're doing is remembering that there's a part of you, you might call it your soul, that's not afraid of your shadow, that's been able to hold on to it. There's also a part of you that knows how to mourn your pain because it's still holding on to it for you. There's a part of you, it might be your soul, that's not afraid of your light. There's a part of you that's urging you toward wholeness, that's keeping you connected to what you've experienced and what you've been through. So the idea is to behold that and just hold that for 5 to 10 seconds. And you might want to start with a moment of joy. Negative experiences stick in our brain so fast. It actually takes 5 to 10 seconds for positive stimuli to impact the neurons. It takes longer. So you might want to practice this once or twice or a few times with something beautiful first. I did it this afternoon when I was in the middle of a busy rush and several different things happening, and a hospice patient I needed to chart on and that we were concerned about. And I looked out the window and there were those enormous cloudy, bright clouds, you know, like just after the snowfall, and the sun was coming through and the clouds were just amazing. And I tried this. I put my hand over my heart and breathed deeply. And I got real. And what I was feeling was hopefulness. And then I thanked the part of me that could hold on to the hopefulness and draw my attention to it for just 5 to 10 seconds. And then I let go and I moved on. So that's the anchoring heart technique. And I borrowed it from the Opus Peace group, who are supporting veterans, especially with PTSD. And they said, share it with everybody. So I know that they're not upset with me for sharing it with you. They're not trying to make money off of it, but that's one grounding technique you could use when something erupts to help you stay connected with what you're actually feeling, so you can be more whole. It's 7:45 already. It's so fun to talk to you. It could go on for a long time, but I know you have other things to do, including sleep. So
It is so powerful and so beautiful. And I mean, just
Indeed.
personally, I'm just so grateful for this. I feel so much better just being here and listening to you, and what a gift you have, honestly, sincerely. It's just amazing. I know we all feel that way. We all have our own journeys and own stories and own trauma and past. And it's like, that's just beautiful. Thank you so, so much.
yeah, I'm really happy to help. Happy to be here. Happy to share that. Are there any questions that anybody has, and anything that's come up for you? I'm struggling to scroll on my computer if you're wondering what I'm doing here. There we go.
I think I don't know why it just makes me think of like Cass's day and Cass's journey right now in this season with her dad. It just like, sometimes those little things seem so like, oh, there's no way that could work, but like, it's always worth a try. And it also is just very powerful, those simple things. I'm grateful for hearing that heart technique.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you, Christina, for mentioning to practice your practice when you're in a really great space, when you're looking at something beautiful, or basically anytime you're not actually in trigger. That's such great advice, because like Audra said, yeah, I know these, but when I'm there, I can't use them and I forget about them. And I think that's part of the practice, right? So I want to thank you for that advice. I'm going to follow it myself because I am guilty of that myself. I know a lot of grounding practices, but I don't practice them unless in it, and then I find I'm not very good at it. And then I wonder why I'm not good at it.
Yeah, like, of all the habits we have, let's make these our habits, like our good habits.
And also, when you get to that point where it's a good feeling and you're doing this kind of thing, then try to memorize what that feels like. Because that, maybe it doesn't happen that often. So when it does, just memorize, oh, that was a really good experience.
Right.
Mhm.
It's true.
Well, maybe should somebody give me a heads up if I should stop recording?
Yeah.
I guess, does anyone else have any questions or any comments or feedback?
I'm not trying to rush the meeting. I just didn't know if everybody wanted the questions on the recording.
Mm.
But if you do, I love it. I think it's great.
I love what people have offered. I confess that I'm late to the game on remembering to practice when it's like a good moment.
That's actually such good advice, because then our brain like triggers us in a good way. Like, oh wait, no, hold on. I know what to do here.
Yeah. Well, one thing I think is interesting is like the instinctive thing, like when you hear surprising news or sad news and you go like this and you inhale, and then you maybe put your hand on your chest. I think that's an interesting, like, maybe a little body wisdom whisper, like, oh, I
Yeah,
might need an anchor here,
I do that spontaneously a lot.
Yeah, that spontaneous thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good cue. Like maybe that's like our body's cue to anchor them. Yeah.
Oh, I just want to say, so I am in recovery. So I've learned some of these things. I'm also in therapy, trauma therapy. So, and I'd never done that before. And so I've learned some of those techniques. But for you to like say about practice in the good moments, so thank you, because that's a really, I wouldn't have thought of that, because I don't think of it either. I don't think of any of those tools when I'm in. And the breathing and what you had just said. So my sponsor, so when I get like all, and I call her and I'm in that moment, and she'll let me, spill it. And then, and I don't realize it, but then I'll eventually, and she always says, that's my girl. There you go. When she hears that. And so, and my good spot that I just thought of as you were saying about practicing when something good and the joy is when I see a bluebird. Because that's my signal from above. And when I see that bluebird, because that I always, when I see them, I go, oh, that's right, thank you, and that's my joy spot. We had this thing going on social media with some of my recovery friends, and they kept putting up, and they would nominate you to put up a picture that brings you joy with no explanations.
Mhm.
Somebody, I was like, please don't. Anyway, somebody did. And so scrolling through pictures that I had on Facebook, because I don't have any of my, and that was really difficult to scroll through to find something that brought me joy. I kept, because it seemed like there just wasn't, until I would get like way back. And but getting there was emotional, but I would find some. And I had talked about that with my therapist as well. So that was good that got brought up. So I'm glad I did all that, because I learned something. And so now we're going to start getting deeper in the therapy, and start addressing some of the traumas from the past.
And Mary, you mentioned something really great, which is that your sponsor and your therapist, like we can help each other do this too. And some of the chaplains with Opus Peace do this with the patients. Now, what I'm going to say is I believe in consent. So you need to ask your friend if they're okay with you doing this and or, practice, but we can actually do it for each other, depending on the kind of friend you have, you can help someone else put the hand on their heart, but again, ask first. But
We always share this because it's
right.
good information, and any tools that we can share with one another, it's just all good.
Yeah.
So, but I will.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I do know in the program, so I know a lot of veterans that suffer from PTSD, and we all share information.
Yeah.
That's how we learn and help each other. So, but I just want to thank you too before I shut up.
Yeah, and
You're very welcome. Thank you. It's really, I feel like the lucky one. I get to hang out with you all, and I'm really grateful for you, and I learn from you too. So I'll say that I have some right now, regular office hours on Wednesdays. I'm going to just put my email address and phone number in the chat so that if you want to reach out, I'm here for you and happy to help. And if I'm not the right person, connect you to somebody who is.
Awesome. Thank you.
Christina, thank you so much. I know sometimes our work in recovery of whatever kind or support, that supportive role, we kind of feel like, oh, is this really helping anybody? But like the ripple effect of even just like the techniques or whatever, I think it immeasurable. And so especially in this group, because we all have such close connections to other fire survivors. And yeah, so this is so, yeah.
I have a blessing to end with if you want to end, if you're close to end.
Yes.
When you're ready to end, I have one.
Awesome.
Anything else? I don't want to end you prematurely, but
I
No,
definitely
it's
want
okay.
to
No, I
record
think,
that.
oh yeah, yeah. No, I think we're ready. We're 2 hours in and I think we're good.
so you may know that the root of the word courage is a Latin word meaning
Uh-huh.
heart.
Yeah.
So take courage, dear heart, is to hold up a mirror and look and see that you have a brave hero inside you who's not afraid of your feelings, who can help you grow, who's big enough to hold all that you are. Thank you for taking heart and blessing me with your heart too. Have a very happy Valentine's Day.
Thank
My
you.
God.
You
This-
too.
Oh, Valentine's.
You a million times.
Hugging you, Cass.
Yeah.
Hugging you back.
I like
Thank
that.
Yes, so much love in this room, and I'm so happy we spent this time together, you guys. And I think Erica will be back next week, but you know, I'm always like around.
you. Always love having you.
Oh, thank you all. Really, I genuinely care and love all of you guys. And Christina, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. This is really super extra special.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cass, can you send me Christina's phone number?
I was just gonna say that. I'm gonna put that in the email too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yay. Well,
Yes.
happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
Yeah,
Honestly,
happy
you
Valentine's.
are loved and cared about and supported. So
Okay.
until next time.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
Guys.
okay, bye, friends.